I can just hold space for other people to dream with us and we capture those dreams. And so, of course, if you have just me in a room, you just have my own thoughts, which is, maybe not worth much. But if you have me and 15 other people in the room and you facilitate that properly, then you have a lot of dreams that you can bring, you can bubble up, and you can, create a roadmap and a vision around. And that is design. Design is co-creation, co-collaboration. It's not, and when we talk about working autonomously, teams working autonomously, we're not saying do it all yourself, right? We're saying hold space for other people to do it with you, but autonomously sort of drive the vision forward.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Design Drives podcast, where we explore why, how, and what design and designers are driving forward. The mission is to interview the most forward-thinking designers, the most innovative creators on the planet, to inspire and help you to reach your full creative potential and to make a positive impact in the world. In the episode, I had the pleasure to chat with Samuel Northway, head of design at Mason in Seattle. And in the past, he worked as the VP of brand and product design at Goldman Sachs. He worked as a lead designer on Deloitte and as a design director at AT&T, besides many other experiences. During the episode, we talk about his mindset and motivation working in the creative industry and uncover many insights on how to approach innovation projects or innovation in general without getting burned out and create shared ownership, which is critical for innovation to get moved forward. We also talk about how he has grown design maturity at Goldman Sachs, his learnings as a designer and leader, and what opportunities designers have when changing industries, and how to overcome the fear that is connecting of leaving your comfort zone. Further, we also explore the intersection of physical and digital design, and how new business models actually bring the processes of physical and digital much closer together. Enjoy the episode. All right, I'm here with Samuel Northway. Thank you so much for taking the time, Samuel.
Thank you.
So you are head of product design at Mason, which is a company based in Seattle, which focuses on a smart device platform that is basically managing the infrastructure and the development for delivering dedicated services and allow companies to manage different devices across the companies. You actually have experience working multiple industries before that, working at both in-house and consultancy, working in art direction and product design. So I'm really looking forward to dive into sort of your experiences working in different industries, applying design and creative in different sectors and sharing basically some perspectives for other designers. So we're looking forward to that. Before we kind of jump into that, Samuel, it would be really cool if you could share a little bit about your background, a little bit about your story for the audience.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sebastian, for having me. It's great to be here. Not to go too far back, but when I was a kid, my father was a creative director. And so, my allowance money came from photo retouching and book layouts and Photoshop. And that's how I went to go see a movie on the weekends. My sister Hannah is a developer and my other cousins are designers. And so, all that just to say that I've had incredible mentors in my family and also at the different agencies and companies I've worked for. Like you said, I have a background in what I would call traditional, brand designs, so things like visual identities and campaigns and storyboards and photo shoots and video and that kind of stuff, and spent a good amount of my career as an art director, sort of leading up to being a creative director. And now for the past, 10 years or so, I've been leading product design teams. So teams of software designers, industrial designers, focused around building hardware and software products. But of course, nothing is done in a silo. So I often find myself sort of bridging the gap between brand and product, and sort of have one leg on the brand side of the house and one leg on the product side. And I think that's where at least the companies that I've been working for find a lot of value in using me to bridge that sort of gap between brand and product.
Yeah, and I think specifically at a startup, I think it's exciting because I think you can shape a lot, right? And I think by collaboration with other stakeholders, you can sort of look across, I think, the intersection of like product design and maybe brand design, and of course the product experience is at the core of the brand, right? So I think that's great. And I think what's interesting is also at Mason, you kind of focus on a mobile and hardware, right? At the same time, so digital and hardware. Can you talk maybe a little bit more about that, and sort of from your perspective as the person managing product design, what kind of challenges come along when you try to kind of create experiences across both digital and hardware?
Yeah, so at Mason, we have a lot of different types of designers. We have electrical engineers, hardware designers, industrial designers, what we call product designers traditionally, but at Mason we call them software designers because there's confusion between industrial and
Yeah.
software design. And so right now the team is really focused around creating connected guidelines, visual identity, rules around software and hardware that can bridge the gap between software and hardware. I think what's really unique about Mason is it's really first time opportunity to allow software to shape hardware and allow hardware to shape software. Because traditionally companies, they can't get into the hardware game, right? It's too hard. The timelines, it takes years to develop hardware products. It costs millions of dollars. So, even the biggest companies in the world like Delta or Walmart, they can't really afford to go down the path of creating custom hardware. So what Mason's allowing them to do is, through a Lego structure of hardware, they, for the first time, can say, this is my use case, and I need the hardware to be shaped around my use case. Whereas traditionally, they would go out and buy a bunch of old tablets, they'd buy a bunch of iPads or Samsung devices, and they would put their application on it. They would give the device to, for example, a Delta employee, and the Delta employee would be doing whatever they're doing, whether it's checking people in at the airport or scanning boxes or scanning bags. And they would have to use the existing hardware that's out in the world today. And so you haven't seen a huge amount of hardware innovation, in the way that we've seen software innovation for the past 5-10 years. There's been just a massive amount of software innovation in the world. And hardware is it's too difficult to kind of move quickly in that space and to innovate. And so where Delta would go out and purchase, I think the best way I found to think about it is Delta would go out and purchase a bunch of old iPads, and they would put their application on it. They would then send the iPad to their employee. They have to worry about repairs and warehousing and logistics and shipping. And then for them to update their application on that device, they have to have the device physically in their possession. So they have to get the device back from the employee, plug it in physically, and then make an update to it, right? So Mason is allowing them to do all of that remotely. So Delta no longer even has to touch the device. It can go directly from a Mason warehouse to a Delta employee, and then Delta can remote into it, make updates, push their application, have full control of the operating system, decide what features to turn on or off, or put it into kiosk mode or open access, high security things like for government sectors. And that's because of the innovation of the mobile infrastructure that Mason's providing, the ability to manage fleets of devices and remotely monitor, troubleshoot, upgrade the devices without having to physically touch them.
Yeah. I'm wondering, where did the innovation come from, in the sense that, I think, like, usually you have basically existing platforms, right? Where developers can develop software for like iOS or Android, right? And there are, of course, different hardware aspects to it. They certainly have a certain runtime, right? Like, there's a certain amount of years where this works on this version of the operating system until it gets updated, right? And I think, like, one of the changes with hardware is then often, I guess, like, the manufacturing, right? Was there a certain innovation on the manufacturing that allows you to, create custom hardware for these use cases? I'm wondering a little bit, what was the technical enabler, both on the physical and digital side, that allows for that flexibility that you're describing? I think on the one side, on the hardware side, that, where you actually get that flexibility, you can actually create custom hardware. The digital side, basically that longevity of software as sort of like platforms emerge, and sort of like updatability and all of that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think supply chain issues are never going to go away, especially in today's age. There's even the biggest companies in the world, Qualcomm, Apple, are having major supply chain issues.
Yeah.
The way that we're thinking about building hardware is, again, in sort of a Lego structure format. So you have a baseline product, and now you need that product to scan boxes, right? So you can plug in peripherals, or the company's moving into the RPM, remote patient monitoring healthcare space, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry coming up right now. And so, again, taking a core device and being able to put peripherals around it, like blood pressure cuffs and thermometers and
Amazing.
scales, and so that you can meet with your doctor from the comfort of your home, but you still have all of the different ways to measure your vitals and to send that back to your doctor. So yeah, thinking about it in terms of sort of a Lego fashion where you can plug things into base components and you can
Yeah.
build what you need. Other use cases like clinical trials is a really big one, where they're giving people a smartwatch for the clinical trial, and so they can answer some questions throughout the day as they're trying a new drug, and simultaneously can be reading their vitals and sending that back and capturing all of that data.
Mhm, mhm. So basically, this does the speed come into working with existing components and having that Lego approach when it comes to hardware? Because actually, like one of the challenges, I think that you're describing from physical and digital design and sort of the different timelines. And I actually myself made a lot of experience sort of working with these two different timelines, also specifically in the automotive sector is very present, right? Where like building a vehicle takes very long, but building the software might not take so long, right?
Yeah.
So this is true in many cases. People working in smart home, for example. I was recently speaking to one of the design managers at IKEA, for example, and if they're working on smart home products, they have the same thing, right? Like hardware takes longer than software, right?
Mhm.
And you always have to think about like an evolution of the hardware and then see how the digital experience makes up. You also have to see like where does digital wants to go in the long run and what kind of
Yeah.
physical enabler we need, right? Because the
Mhm.
physical enabler take time. Sometimes they, like digital enabler take time, like different backends, different technologies, but physical
Mhm.
enabler take lot more time. So I'm wondering a little bit, does that speed and sort of that alignment between digital and physical design comes through having that Lego approach and basically being able to manufacture products at high speed?
Yeah, I think so. Just to be clear, Mason's not creating the software that goes on the devices, right? So,
Yeah.
in the example we were using, Delta makes their own application, and they're going to put that application on the Mason device. The speed of hardware, it's called hardware for a reason, right? It's really difficult. It takes a lot of money and a lot of time to take it through all the PDT cycles and all the validation cycles and get it to markets and get it certified for different countries, and there's a lot of complexity involved in supply chain. But the Lego structure is enabling, for the most part, people need the baseline product, and then they depending on their use case, they need it to sort of adapt to we need this thing to scan boxes, right? Or we want this smartwatch to be able to sort of do X, Y, and Z. And so in that instance, we're able to, yeah, take their use case and sort of work around that base component. I think the benefit of Mason, it is getting to market quicker than you would be able to. It's having all the pipelines set up with logistics, with supply chain, being able to use our in-house industrial designers, hardware engineers, electrical engineers. And so, a company that wants to, like, for example, the next Peloton, or the next Square, right, who made their own hardware. Mason's allowing companies like that to innovate quicker, to focus on their software so that they don't have to get into the hardware game.
Mhm.
Because as we all know, once you step in the door of the hardware space, it's a whole other world with completely different timelines. So now the next Square, the next startup that wants to make some sort of hardware software device, they can focus on their software. They can come to Mason for their hardware and for their mobile infrastructure, more importantly. And so they can manage their fleets of devices out in the world, in addition to using Mason to sort of innovate on that hardware space that they're doing.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. And I assume when you're thinking about the industrial design part of the hardware piece, this is probably also is to a certain degree guided or run, or at least basically directed a little bit by the needs and the feedback from the company that you work with, right? Because they probably, they have a certain corporate identity, certain brand, and so there's a certain customization in the product design, I assume, right? Which is based also on that collaboration with the partner, right?
Yeah, that's right. So I think Mason is thinking about itself like the stage crew. We're behind the scenes, and we allow the company to
Yeah,
white label the product,
yeah,
right? So we don't need to be, there's some sort of co-branding that's happening as well. But for the most part, we're going to allow, for example, Delta to put their logo on the device,
yeah.
and everybody thinks this is a Delta device. So we're giving them the opportunity to really focus on the experience of their software and not have to worry about the mobile infrastructure and the hardware. And historically, they've been duct taping together these mobile solutions, right? They're sort of like bootstrapping it. They go out, they buy a bunch of old tablets. Those tablets go out of date really quickly. Security and software updates are no longer supported by Apple or by Android. And they're working within this sort of walled garden of an operating system. They can't customize the hardware whatsoever. And they just sort of have, to work with what's out in the marketplace, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you think a little bit about maybe also your past experiences, right? I mean, you have been working in different industries, and all kind of led up to like now basically working on product design, basically working between like mobile and physical design. Can you talk a little bit more also about sort of your experiences that were before that? I think something specifically that could be interesting for the audience is that I think you'd really jump between different industries. And I think a lot of designers might be at that, maybe at the point of their career where they may be thinking about like, they maybe have been working at a certain industry for a while. And there's a certain fear, right? If you kind of jump into an area where you're maybe not the expert yet, right? Especially if you've built up some vertical knowledge in a certain space, right? Did you also felt that fear sometimes to kind of go out of the bubble again and sort of what was some of your experience when it comes to kind of jumping into complete different experiences?
Yeah, that is a great question. I have jumped around a lot of industries, and I think what enables me to jump into a new industry is the idea that I don't have to be the subject matter expert. So the ability to facilitate and co-create, to go find the subject matter experts to work with, right? To create user groups and focus groups of experts or real customers that can help guide the process. Sort of focusing on being the facilitator, holding space for other people to come in and co-create along with this. Designers don't have to be the expert. Designers, in my opinion, need to be somebody who can hold space and can help other people come into the creation process and facilitate that co-creation. There's certain principles and practices and fundamental sort of frameworks and guidelines that we use as designers that help us move through discovery processes, and using design thinking, which is a widely overused term right now. But there's certain practices that we use as designers that help us to navigate finding the right answers. And that doesn't mean that the answer has to come from us. Oftentimes the answer doesn't come from us, right? We look outside of ourselves to experts or to the end user to find out what they want and what they need.
Yeah, so I think I totally agree to what you say. I mean, I think this is one of the strengths of designers, right? That I think not necessarily we have to be the experts in everything we are designing for. I think there's a certain vertical knowledge though that you build up over time, right? Where you will just become way more efficient
Mhm.
because you're kind of solving similar problems uh, very often. And I think you kind of become very quick problem solver, even to the visual UX service design, but you get an understanding. And I think designers can become very efficient. And I think there's an efficiency change towards joining somewhere and then like being there for a while and having that vertical knowledge. But even without it, depending on, of course, like what is he doing exactly, it's not underestimated that depending on like what you work on, that the facilitation part is important for designers. It's specifically like nowadays, if you have to work with kind of new challenges like having at Mason, right, where maybe you don't know each client that comes to you and kind of partner that you work with, you have to understand their problem, why they want to build a device for what use case. You really have to sort of get that understanding because maybe it's an industry that you never worked with and
Mhm.
you're not familiar with the workflows they're describing. So, but I think that's a sort of the beauty of design to kind of learn about these different things. If you think though about maybe were there certain challenges when you were doing this, or maybe a particular one that you can maybe remember that was a little bit more difficult, sort of to overcome at the very beginning, any kind of learnings that you made there, when joining a company?
Yeah, I completely agree that, although you don't have to be a subject matter expert, once you work in a vertical for a good amount of time, you can operate, more efficiently, higher velocity, and it does take some time. So I remember when I came in as a VP of design at Goldman Sachs. It was my first time working in the financial industry. I had never expected to work in the financial industry. And, all the people, all my friends and my partner were like, wow, you're going to go work for, Goldman Sachs. That's really different than the other companies you worked for. And it did. It took me some time to wrap my head around the financial industry, terminology, the different constructs. And it's a very old company, 150-year-old company. A lot of legacy systems, a lot of legacy processes. And when I came in, design still didn't have a seat at the table. Design leadership was just coming in. So, there was a lot of culture shifting. There was a lot of sort of holding hands and bringing people along in the journey. What is research? How do we use research? What is UX design? What is UI design? How do we use these things? And so I think that was quite exciting. I think coming into Goldman was a big question mark for me because it was a new industry. And yeah, it was a little bit concerning, the fact that, one, I had no experience with finance. And number two is I didn't really have any interest in finance either at that time. And so why I took the job, I think I'm not quite sure. But in the end, I really enjoyed it because we were able to affect a lot of culture shifting within the organization. By the time I left, we had a seat at the highest table. We were getting involved in strategic decisions at the highest level of the company. We had affected a new visual identity, a new brand system, put out new applications, client-facing applications, internally facing applications. So I think what I would, the advice I would give to people going into a new industry is remember that failing is the first ingredient of design, and allow yourself to fail quickly, right? So be a creator, be a builder. Don't forget that, design is about building something. So take that into your daily practice of, if you create 10 things, one of them might be good. The other nine, probably not, right? So just keep on building and creating. Find mentors, find subject matter experts that you can lean on. Don't feel like you have to be the expert in the room, right? I think take your role as the facilitator, as the person that helps other people co-create and co-collaborate together.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way to frame it. I really love what you just said, that failing is the first ingredient of design, right? I mean, that's how you iterate, right? And it's just part
Yeah,
of it. And having that mindset, I think. Of course, there's fear kind of involved in that. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're not innovating in the first place, right? Uh,
That's right. Yeah. So on my desk, I have a little sticky note that says exactly that. It says failure is the first ingredient in design. I've had it there for the last 3 or 4 years, and I keep it there because it's a daily reminder to myself to not get stuck in the synthesis. Don't get stuck in like over analyzing. Oh, I need more research. Oh, I need more of this, right? And of course, we want to understand who we're building things for and why we're building them. But a lot of times the fastest path is just to take a shot and then, validate it later, just concept it, right? And that's what designers are really good at. We're the only ones that can conceptualize. Designers are the only ones that can cast a stone and put a visual to it and do it in a way that you can have a real, a prototype that feels kind of real, and that you can get in front of people and that you can validate further. So I encourage myself, I encourage my teams to just remind themselves to be creators. That's what we are. We're builders. And a lot of people get stuck in that, paralysis analysis, they call, right? Just like
mhm.
getting stuck and trying to find the answers in other areas. And sometimes you just have to take a step forward and be willing to fail in order to get to a successful outcome.
Yeah, and, beautifully said. I think we need some mugs or T-shirts from Design Drives with that posted quote. I think.
I agree. Let's get Sebastian.
Yeah, I think really cool. I think like also what you talked about at Goldman Sachs is also very interesting. I mean, that's sort of like a core topic of Design Drives always is that, how do you kind of establish a design culture, right? How do you communicate in a company what design can deliver, how design can drive innovation, and sort of maturing a design culture. I think is such an important topic of the podcast. So Could you talk maybe a little bit more about sort of the design culture at Goldman Sachs, and how did you approach that growth of design, and how did you bring stakeholders along? Because I think that's sort of very interesting for people to learn about.
Mhm. Yeah, so I think there's sort of two major ingredients there. One is affecting change as fast as you can, right? So taking the iterative approach, find a little corner that you can make an adjustment to, that you can measure the impact of it immediately. And that's going to help build trust with your stakeholders and your partners. It's going to allow them to see the value of design, even if it's something small. So go look at the onboarding, go look at some of their digital systems, and find some user problems, and figure out how you can execute on those as fast as you can, and how you can measure the value of that to the end user. That's going to build trust, right? The other side of it is just as important, is creating some sort of North Star for the team to drive towards. Of course, if you don't know which direction you're going, we all know that over time you just build a bowl of tangled spaghetti, right? And so that's what was happening at Goldman. Before I came in, they were just bolting on more functionality, different functionality. They were just bolting it onto their platform without a view of the holistic sort of experience across the ecosystem. And they didn't have a North Star. They didn't have a direction they were working towards. And so over time, over years, you don't really know what you're going to end up with. And you end up building, you end up just building whatever you build, right? So you have to take both approaches. One is that incremental updates and measuring that, and the other side is setting a vision for the overall strategy, setting a North Star, getting people excited about that, bringing them in to co-create and co-collaborate around that North Star. So bring in marketing, bring in sales, bring in operations, get really tight with customer success, really understand what people are saying about the current product from the customer success team. At Goldman, we would meet with our customer success team every 2 weeks, and they would go over the top reported issues that were coming through. And sometimes we would drop our strategic work to go fix something that was a real problem happening right now, right? And so tuning in to the immediate, what's happening right now, figuring out how to measure that and affect change in the moment, but then also casting a vision so that everybody can drive in that direction and getting people excited about that vision. I think you have to have sort of both sides of that. One is right now, today, and the other one is where are we going in 2 years?
Yeah, it's the short term and the long term at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And I think, like, when I speak to other design leaders, I think one of the like ongoing theme is that it's about listening, right, at the very beginning. And I really like what you said. It's about, listening, but then you try to take one problem and attack that really quick, just to basically build that relationship also in the short term already. And I
Hmm.
think that maybe speeds things up. If you think about maybe the topic of basically financial innovation, right? Since you gained some experience there, what do you think are opportunities for designers in the space? I think besides what you're doing, there's a lot of changes in the space, right? There is everything, of course, around, like, blockchain and sort of like progressive ways of payment, and the whole topic about like the unbanked
Hmm.
people who may not have actually a bank account. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for designers, but you may have a better kind of picture on that. Any kind of learnings on sort of the opportunities for designers working in the space of let's say financial innovations based on your past experiences, and what kind of impact designers can create?
Hmm. Yeah. So what I would say is I'm not an expert in finance. I never really expected to work in finance. And I think that was part of my kind of special sauce coming into it. As I brought a totally different perspective than designers who work in that space. Yeah, clearly there's a lot of innovation happening there with decentralized banking and blockchain, and all of these things that are sort of hot topics in the moment. But it comes down to experience, like everything else, especially with this next generation of kids coming into the world, right? All they care about is experience. That's what everybody's focused on. And so having and the bar is really high, right? People expect products to be smart, predictive, proactive, and we all know that doesn't just happen by accident, right? That's a very intentional thing that you have to map out through user journeys and flows, and really understand how to make something feel good. And so there's a lot of opportunities, just like in healthcare, just like in government, in finance, these industries that are highly regulated, that it's hard to affect change in, finance, in healthcare, in government. And so I think that's why, they're sort of lagging behind a little bit. Finance has been catching up. But the big one that we're tackling is healthcare at Mason, coming up. And so again, I think it's around the experience that you build for the end user, and that ultimately becomes the key differentiator. And so there's tons of opportunities in these highly regulated spaces to come in and fix the sins of the past, is how I would call it, and make it a smoother ride for people.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's great that you kind of connected to basically other industries, which I guess are similar, because I think the opportunities for innovation comes through the legacy, comes through the systems that are in place, through the regulations that make it difficult. But that is both a challenge and an opportunity, right? And this is not just true for finance, but this is true for healthcare, um, environment topics, and many others. So yeah, I think very cool, Samuel. Thanks for sharing your story and background. I think this is super interesting to hear. I think what would be also interesting for the audience to hear is like, what is your motivation as a designer when you look at the opportunities that you can tackle as a designer? Is there anything kind of that is driving you, that fills you with motivation when it comes to your work?
Yeah, great question. I think over the years, love for psychology and sort of drive to understand how humans experience, whether it's an ad campaign, a digital product, a physical product or experience, has been, a continuous curiosity and exploration in design, just understanding the psychology around how things are used. Working to understand how a user's brain connects to an experience that sparks excitement, inspiration, is something that sort of motivates me. I love to see people enjoy and have a good experience with whatever they're doing. Um, I think also when it comes to the team, recognizing that everybody has to start somewhere and that many people have unrealized potential that needs to be developed. Finding ways to bring out individuals' talents and steer them in the right direction, helping them to set goals. One tactic I really enjoy is the thank you letter to self. So imagining 2 years from now where you want to be, and sort of writing that letter to thank yourself for doing X, Y, and Z to get there has been a huge help for me personally, and something that I employ on my teams. And then helping teams to develop empathetic emotional intelligence for each other, for their stakeholders, for the customer, helping them to understand that visualizing the world from somebody else's perspective and understanding that person's feelings is just as important within the team as it is in building user-centric products for end users.
Mhm. And I think what you were just mentioning about like setting your goal where you want to be in 2 years, is it something that you kind of try to apply on the project level, on the product level, or more on a personal development level?
Yeah, so it can definitely be applied on a product level through North Stars, creating
Yeah,
sort of
yeah,
a vision of where
yeah.
the company is going to go in 2 years. I think it's even more powerful when you do it on a personal level and you try to help people develop their soft skills, right? The hard skill is using, Figma or Photoshop or Illustrator and or
Yeah.
whatever design, CAD design for industrial design programs, Rhino and stuff is that stuff's really great. And I think we sort of expect that our design team is going to be an expert at using those tools, but developing those soft skills and helping people to understand how important it is to to go beyond being a good designer and move into that space of being a facilitator, of being a co-creator, of holding space, for other people to be designers, is I think has been really important for me and for the teams that I work with. Um, Creating an open invitation for teams to dream big is a big one, right?
Mhm.
Being the asker of big questions that drive curiosity and the maker of big ideas, and helping them feel comfortable failing. Failing is again the first ingredient in design. So allowing people to make mistakes and to figure out how to, get to a successful result. Um, it provides that sort of personal security that the team needs, which, as we all know, when you don't feel secure personally, it's hard to make good work, right? You have to feel good to make good.
That's a great way to frame it. And I really love what you said about, I think that's sort of like one of the roles of a leader in general, not just a design leader, right? Is that, and it's so rewarding, right, to uplift people and like help them to succeed, and sort of like how you basically framed it around, yeah, basically also looking into their personal development. Where do they want to grow? How we can you help them to get there, right? To understand like where they could maybe improve, or what would be beneficial for them, and what would be aligning with their personal goals, and sort of and yeah, and I think like an invitation for people to kind of think about that future and kind of develop towards that. That's, I think, a
Mhm.
beautiful way to kind of look at the role of a director and leader. So yeah, thanks for sharing that.
This is what I tell my teams. Our job is to be in service of other groups. So we think about product as our clients. We think about engineering as our
Mm,
clients, just like the end user. And it's our job to hold space. Nobody else can concept and can dream the future like a designer can, right? So it's the designer's job to help other people create that future and to facilitate the space for them to be able to do it, right? We don't have to have the answers as designers.
yeah,
And that's for me, that's a huge blessing. I don't have to feel like I have to have the answers for
yeah,
something.
yeah,
And
exactly.
so what I can do is I can just hold space for other people to dream with us, and we capture those dreams. And so, of course, if you have just me in a room, you just have my own thoughts, which is, maybe not worth much. But if you have me and 15 other people in the room and you facilitate that properly, then you have a lot of dreams that you can bring, you can bubble up, and you can, create a roadmap and a vision around. And that is design. Design is co-creation, co-collaboration. It's not, and when we talk about working autonomously, teams working autonomously, we're not saying do it all yourself, right? We're saying hold space for other people to do it with you, but autonomously sort of drive the vision forward.
No, I couldn't agree more, Samuel. I think you really frame, I think, a lot of important topics here that I totally agree. I think, yeah, I think that's exactly what design is, right? We don't have to have all the answers, but it's basically facilitating that process and visualizing the source of others, the source of the collective,
Mhm.
the problem solving of the collective, and sort of helping to kind of paint that picture, to oversimplify, and sort of bring everyone together. Because what the problem is, like, if you have multiple people, it's all just theoretical, right? Before you create any prototype, create any kind of mock-up, visualization, or kind of experience, it's all just theoretical discussions, right? And a
Mhm.
prototype could be as easy as drawing a doodle on a whiteboard. It could be the first step towards like aligning like 10 stakeholders towards like where we want to go. Could be going as far as building like a full-fledged prototype. But I think it's that bandwidth, and I think that's sort of really like an impact designers can do. One of the examples that's coming up where we often up in the podcast is like, if you think about maybe a design leader being in a meeting with different stakeholders, say as purchasing, business, and sort of like as a designer, you're listening in, they're talking about things that you maybe cannot like fully like understand. Specifically, if you join newly to the company, but like just being there and maybe trying to kind of doodling it out was one of the big sort of things. How I was talking to many designers, how they could involve themselves into that problem solving discussion by just being there already, and sort of like connecting the dots, right? And kind of trying to
Mhm.
visualize it, even on a simple level. That's already sort of, I think, what design is: facilitation. And yeah, I think you did a great record of framing that. Cool. Oh, thanks for sharing. There's a certain understatement that you're describing, like a certain sort of approach towards stakeholder management, where you were saying, okay, like we were the listeners, we basically put the puzzles together, right? And I think by that you're driving you're driving like a co-author process, right? Where you
Mhm.
trying to take, it's about like getting as many signatures basically under what you're building, and not making it something that is just signature by the designer, because the
That's right.
reality is If that's happening, it's gonna fail for sure because nobody
That's
wants
right.
to take that forward. Nobody feels that it doesn't generate collective ownership, right? And I think you
Mhm.
always want to get to a point where you have collective ownership behind what you're building, right? And I think the only way is, like you said, is like stepping back and sort of bringing in the other people in to the forefront, key decision makers as well. So, and I think the other thing that you're describing is important, that like the detachment. I think this is hard for any designer. I was struggling with that myself when I was younger. Is that you're so emotionally invested into what you're doing, specifically as a designer, and so if you really try to make the best out of it, and and there's it's sort of it's sort of there are two sides of that. On the one side, I think that ownership creates drive and motivation to create the best result. Yeah. On the other side, I think like you need to take away that ownership to really drive innovation in the first place. So that kind of play between like feeling enough ownership in order to kind of to make a great design and keep people motivated and sort of like um, sort of like innovate. And on the other side is like you also have on the other side that aspect where the advantage of not having enough ownership. That's sort of a balance act, right, in the
Mhm.
project.
It is,
So
yeah, because designers, we like to go and
yeah,
make things beautiful on our own, right? And we like to take ownership of it. We say, "Hey, look at this thing that I created," right? And I think that's the kind of first issue there is,
yeah,
the key to presenting new work is making sure that you have the signatures of the key people in the room
yeah,
before you present it. And you
yeah,
do that by co-creating with them from the beginning, right? So, for example, we just presented a new North Star for Mason, and that was done through co-creation. So I knew that the really important people in the room that were there was like 85 people we were presenting to, and the really important people in the room, they were part of that co-creation process. So there's no question in my mind if there's going to be buy-in for that concept, right? You should never be in a situation where you're presenting something and you're not sure how people are going to react to it. Do the work, bring them along in the journey, co-create with them, and you don't have to worry about that.
yeah. No,
It's a nice
absolutely.
peace of mind.
Yeah,
There's like safe processes to sort of navigate, and then as we say in the industry, don't be precious with the work, right? If you co-create, then it's not yours, and you don't have to be precious with it. You don't have to, don't hang on to it. Don't feel like somebody's stepping on your face if they're, giving you critiques about it. It's an evolution. It's a journey that gets to a result at the end, but it can't just be done by yourself. You
yeah,
got to
yeah.
bring everybody else in the journey.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of designers struggle with, like basically connecting so much to the work where I'm the work, and like if the work is not good, like I'm not a good designer,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
I think that's a very no, you really need to detach yourself. You're not the product, you're not the design solution, right? Like you're not fully in control, and there's a beauty to that and an advantage to that. Yeah, I mean, super great insights. Thanks for sharing them, Samuel.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Samuel, I would love to continue talking to you, but I think we need to wrap it up, unfortunately, because of time. So I would just like to thank you on behalf of the audience for taking your time to chat with me today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
All right, that was the episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to give it a thumbs up and let me know in the comments about your thoughts and biggest learnings from the episode. I'm always super curious about that. You can also tag me in a post about your biggest takeaway and share your insights with others. Pass on your learnings. If the episode provided you a lot of value, make sure to follow, subscribe, and share it with friends and colleagues so they also have the chance to learn and grow. Until next time, cheers.